Well, Sinclair, always great to connect with you. And I know you're an expert when it comes to these digestive disorders, these gut health issues. And we have so many people that are dealing with gut inflammation. Why do you think that is nowadays?
I think it actually all starts from the quality of our food, air, and water.
Mm.
I think everybody's getting exposed to things that they didn't actually consent to be exposed to. With, the preservatives, the organophosphates like herbicides and pesticides in our food. And what that does is it starts to disrupt our microbiome consistently and continuously. So those little chemical exposures downregulate the healthy populations of our keystone gut bacteria species, and they invite pathogens to actually bloom. And organisms like Candida and even H. pylori that all have a job to do in a healthy body, as long as they're kept in check, start to pleomorph into their aggressive forms and start to bloom in these pathogenic blooms. And then you get this like bizarre parasite dysbiosis. But it really does all start with what's in our food, air, and water that you didn't know you were ingesting. So it's an interesting state of affairs right now. What do you think?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You mentioned pleomorph. So basically, all these microbes are commensal, meaning that they have a natural home in our internal environment, but they need to be kept in check and in certain quantities. And then they're healthy, but they can actually change their form into a more pathogenic state when there's disruption in our internal ecosystem. That's what you're saying there.
Yeah, exactly. And that really does open the door to larger parasites. Everybody's getting exposed to parasites, whether you're, walking barefoot on the ground, whether you're, petting somebody else's dog, your kiddo getting coughed on next to their friend at school. It's not a question of if we get exposed to these pathogens. It's just a question of are you a good host
Mm.
or not? And that comes down to your immune strength and, the quality of your terrain, meaning, your cellular matrix. Are you flushing out what you're getting exposed to fast enough that your immune system can stay strong enough to fight these guys off?
Yeah,
So,
that's so important. Obviously, we're being exposed to all these different toxic chemicals. They're going to impact our mitochondrial health, right? And in particular, the mitochondria within our gut. And then the mitochondria are not going to be able to produce energy effectively, and so that's going to cause disruption in those gut cells, right? And they're not going to be able to suck the oxygen out of the intestinal environment. And a lot of these pathogens really thrive in a higher oxygen environment. And if the mitochondria in the intestinal cells can't get the oxygen out of the gut environment, then that provides a great environment for these parasites and for these, larger microbes. And the very beneficial microbes really are the obligate anaerobes. They're the ones that produce a lot of the butyric acid, the short chain fatty acids, and positive postbiotics. And then they're not going to thrive. So they're going to die off in this higher aerobic or oxygen based environment. And so, it's all one of those things where, you can get heavy exposure to a parasite, and obviously then that will cause kind of a downstream effect of the toxins that the parasite releases impacting the mitochondria. Or you could just have this exposure, kind of this steady exposure to toxins that poison the mitochondria, which now create the higher oxygen environment, which is a really healthy environment for, well, not for us, but healthy environment for these parasites to really to take home and thrive in.
yeah, and it's a really, self-perpetuating cycle, isn't it? Because as soon as you start getting this dysbiosis generating, then you start to get all these secondary effects, like your gut motility will slow down because parasites love to slow down the transit time of
Mm.
your food so that it actually rots in your gut. They have more time to feed on it. It ferments. They get a higher sugar content. They're literally getting high off of your food.
Mm.
And that has further downstream issues for you. So you're starting to get bloating and, all the SIBO signs and food sensitivities and constipation or diarrhea or alternating constipation or diarrhea. This is affecting your gut-brain connection where you're getting more and more brain fog because the brain drains last. So if you
Mm.
have any issues with your emunctories, meaning your drainage organs below, you're going to start to experience brain fog, anxiety, easily overwhelmed with new information, short-term memory issues. And you're like, oh my God, I'm too young for senior moments. And you are probably too young for senior moments. That's probably, a gut health issue that can get cleaned up. And it does. It's so interesting because I love parasites. I think they're here to do a job for us. It's not an accident
Hmm.
that they're allowed to thrive because they really do act as toxin sponges, but they come at such a high cost. They can drive so many inflammatory symptoms throughout your body. It's unreal that we're not having a bigger conversation about this.
Yeah, it's so important. And a lot of people, they're getting testing done, but these typical GI tests that people are getting when they go and see their conventional medicine doctor or even a functional medicine doctor, they're not picking up parasites. Why is that the case?
So you got to think like a parasite when you're testing for them. When you look at something like the GI map or a stool test, there's many of them out there now. What you're looking at is one portion of one bowel movement. Is every parasite that you have going
Mm.
to very thoughtfully excrete ovum or dead, compatriots into that stool for you to be like, look, just in case you want to test, here you go. Here's my friends. They're not going to do that. Parasites have their own life cycles. They're very good at hiding. As soon as they die, they secrete enzymes that help them break down their bodies very quickly. So it's very unlikely that you would actually see parasites in the toilet or that they would show up on a GI map or another kind of stool test without provocation. And also, the
Mm.
parasite genome has not been mapped extensively. I can't tell you how many times our, clients have, sent in a tapeworm. Like it's so obvious. It's got the sucker head, the segmented body, and they're sending it in to have it tested by one of these labs because they want proof from a lab report to take back to all the doctors that told them they were crazy. So they could say, look, you missed this. This is why I was
Mm.
suffering. And the lab will come back and say, inconclusive or undigested food. It's like, dude, I saw the sucker head. That's that. It's just an example of it's a great technology, but it's not a definitive answer. So just getting a negative on a stool test does not mean you don't have parasites. And blood work has its own limitations. Every lab provides insights and every lab has its own limitations. You can look for inflammatory markers in blood work, like basophils, eosinophils, are they elevated? And that can point towards certain parasite species to look deeper. But you really do need to start with the symptomology first, because every
Mm.
parasite has its own set of quirks and behaviors that drive symptoms. So that's what a seasoned practitioner will do, will start constellating symptoms and yes, maybe run labs where appropriate, but also recognize the limitations of them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, labs are very rarely definitive. They're more so giving clues on
Right.
certain tendencies that the body may be experiencing, but very rarely are they definitive. And so that's key. You really need to put together health history, labs, symptoms, a lot of different factors in order to figure out what's really taking place in the body.
Yeah.
Now,
Very well
what are
said.
some of the yeah, what are some of the biggest mistakes? A lot of people are interested in eliminating parasites. And so what do you see people doing out there? A lot of people are self-treating. What kind of mistakes are people making?
What's really popular right now is those crunchy accounts where it's a life coach or a mom who
Mhm.
took her one child through something and thinks she has all the answers now. And it's not to disparage them, it's just to recognize the clinical limitations of that lack of experience. So they're pushing like one supplement and they're telling you it's okay to go and do a parasite cleanse. Just buy this one thing from me, coincidentally. And so they're making a living off of selling this one or two supplements. And it's not actually a real protocol that meets your needs and keeps you safe and actually helps you make lasting progress because they don't have the clinical background or depth to know how to do that. The parasites are actually really complex. So that's mistake number one is thinking you can just like, eat some pumpkin seeds or buy some papaya or enzymes, or like this one, detox supplement from an Instagram account. Like that's not how this works. It's not an accident that your body has parasites. And you want to ask your body, what do you need to become back in charge of everything and run the show again? And that means that you need to do this systematically. So we want to open drainage. which means supporting gut motility because a lot of you have compromised gut motility. You may not even know it. But if you're bloating or if you have bowel consistency issues at all, you have gut motility issues. You want to support bile flow and the liver because the liver plays such a huge role in your immune system. And like has plays a crucial role in breaking down every single type of food that you take in, fats, proteins, carbs, sugars. Like this is your liver needs to be on board and it's easily overloaded in this day and age. So we want to bring in some strategic support for that. We also want a binder in place that will mop up the endotoxins, the ammonia, the formaldehyde that these parasites excrete because they're so irritating and inflammatory. And they will up their excretion of endotoxins as you go after them. So if you don't want unnecessary symptoms, don't go in and carpet bomb with just a single product protocol or a very well-meaning functional medicine doc that's brand new to functional medicine that took like a weekend workshop and now just wants to throw the book at you. And it's like, this will be so great. We're going to tackle them and get rid of them. That hunt and kill approach is very indiscriminate. So we want to lay the groundwork for success first. And to your point, we want to add in some mitochondrial support as well because we're asking the body to do what it's already wanted to do. It just hasn't been in a position to do it. So let's add in some energy and give it a fighting start, right?
Yeah, so important, especially a lot of people have been dealing with these for a long time are very sensitive. There are some people that are healthier that, they take one product, they feel better, right? But those people that have been dealing with these issues, especially for a while, very, very sensitive.
Yeah.
And doing something like that can be really hazardous to them.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why you get things like, oh, I herx easily, I crash easily, I'm not
Yeah,
a good detoxer. You are a good detoxer or you'd be dead. Okay, your body knows how to do this. It just needs some strategic support and a well-designed protocol, preferably from a seasoned practitioner that can walk you through this. And, antiparasitics, there's an art to folding them in to the patient's capacity. So,
right.
like to your point, most people become like one of the ways you know that you have parasites is you become highly sensitive to certain foods, environmental stressors. You have more and more histamine sensitivities, mast cell dysregulation. You're not draining or detoxing fast enough to avoid reactions on a good day. And so all these inflammatory symptoms are telling you, I need help. So we want to pre-pave the way before we do this inflammatory act of killing off the parasites and make sure that your body can get them out the exit door quickly, without any interference.
For sure. So for somebody listening, what would be one of the best ways for them to start with this sort of detoxification and healing process?
When you're doing this at home, um, you're not going to like my answer, but because when you don't feel good, it's hard to want to add things to your to-do list. But actually, one of the first things I would ask you to start with is to put yourself in a low EMF environment when you sleep so
Hmm.
that your immune system can do what it wants to do at night, which is go into overdrive, so that anything you do in your protocol can actually work harder for you. So that means turning off the Wi-Fi router, put your cell phone in airplane mode at night, unplug the electronics around your bed. If you're in a sleep number bed, please, please, please unplug that thing. I'm just waiting for that class action lawsuit when people figure out just how bad that is for their health.
Hmm.
Because we have seen in so many cases people being on the right parasite protocol, but the worms don't start pouring out until they unplug the sleep number bed and they turn off the Wi-Fi router because they're just getting fried alive while they sleep, and it's very immune suppressive. And parasites are already immune suppressive. So this is one way to take all of your work further that you can't get wrong, you
Yeah.
know? And to eat anti-inflammatory foods during the process because if you want your whole body's drama of the day to be about recovering from your inflammatory foods, that's the perfect recipe to make sure that you're not healing and making any progress. So
Hmm.
that could be different for different people. You may be histamine sensitive, you may be oxalate sensitive. Both of those are typical for people with parasite issues. You may have developed a dairy intolerance, which can often be reversed when you take care of the parasites. There's so many tricks and tips to eating in an anti-inflammatory way. You need to, account for your bioindividuality. But those are some places that I would look to start before you even start the antiparasitics.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. And then you want to open up your drainage pathways. So you want to get everything moving through your system. What are some of the best strategies for that?
You got to make sure you're pooping every day. So what that's thing one because you drain from the bottom up, right? That just
Mhm.
makes sense. You know, your body loves to push out toxins and metabolic waste, of course, and also parasites through the bowels. You're only pushing out toxins through the kidneys if they're water soluble and your liver's trying to make that decision. Your body knows your kidneys are not as resilient as your gut. So it would rather ship out all the junk through your gut, to the greatest extent possible. So we have to make sure that the doorway to the exit is clear. And that means making sure your colon is moving. So every day, ideally more than once a day, you're moving your bowels and you to completion. So just because you went to the bathroom, if you don't feel complete, you got to take a fresh look at that. Oxy powder, like ozonated magnesium, is a great support for that. It's very gentle and non-habit forming. Bowel mover from Cellcore is also a great one. That's more nuanced and a subtle experience. You can take it with your other supplements. Oxy powder should be taken away from everything else. It's a great thing to do on the way to bed.
Mhm. Yeah.
So those are a couple of my favorites. I like magnesium citrate as long as it's not with fillers or flow
Mhm.
agents because those will irritate the gut lining. So make sure it's clean. Do you have any favorite bowel supports you should add before
Yeah,
we
we
go to the
use
liver?
the oxy powder, magnesium in general, very helpful. The
Yeah.
bowel mover from Cellcore. So yeah, same ones. Yep.
hmm
And then we also try to get the liver and kidneys starting to work and operate better too.
Yeah, exactly. We want to build bile faster and get
Hmm.
bile moving faster because that will help to liberate some of this junk and
Yeah.
really empower the body to start draining as fast as it wants to once more. Because your liver has 2,000 miles of bile ducts. And if that slows down even a little bit because of your exposure to air fresheners that you didn't want to speak up and say anything about in your Uber,
Mm.
or, whatever weird stuff your lunch was microwaved in, that's it all adds up and it slows down bile flow. So how's your liver supposed to be this tour de
Yeah.
force of detox and immune support without a little bit of help in this day and age?
Yeah.
You know,
What are some of your favorite things to help get the liver moving better?
I like to ease in with things like bitters before meals so
Mm.
that we're really getting the gastric juices flowing again and mealtime actually becomes real digestion time once more. The way we eat very haphazard, very fast sets you up for parasite overload because the
Right.
stomach acid can't fire up, hot enough or really the pH is low enough. And your bile flow slows down with all of this overload, so then you're not actually getting enough movement and enough digestion of your food. So that's an on-ramp to parasite overload. So we can start turning that around with bitters. I like Bitter X from Quicksilver, but there's lots of good ones. Once you're deeper into your detox, liver sauce is magical, but I would not start there, especially for sensitive people.
Mm.
I also like balanced formulas like KL Support or, Global Healing Center has several great liver formulas. There's so many good products on the market to support the liver. I just want to make sure that we're not in fantasy land. Like, this is not the 1990s. You're not going to milk thistle your way to a happy liver anymore. That's like a good adjunct support, but it doesn't pack enough punch to actually like help you catch up, but it's a lovely soother, So if you need to soothe, that's great. You always want some element of soothing and, symptom reduction in your protocol, but a well-designed protocol will have several drainage element supports so that you're not experiencing unnecessary symptoms. And so that's the distinction that I draw in this day and age. And of course, a binder, to mop up those endotoxins.
What are some of your favorite binders? That might be a new term for a lot of people. You mentioned it earlier. So what are binders and what are
Yeah.
some of your favorite sources for that?
That's such a great question. Binders are a class of supplements that we use to meet different types of toxins and basically neutralize them. So they will glom onto them with molecular or like chemical or physical bonding, depending on the structure of the binder. And then that actually means that your body can transport the chemicals out the door without the toxin irritating everything it touches, because that's so inflammatory for you
Hmm.
as the body's trying to do that. So it's like neutralizing the threat so that your body can actually excrete the threat. Different binders do different things. So we used to, back in the day when I was trying to heal, from all my chronic issues, we were using clays, like
Mm.
bentonite and different types of clay, zeolites, and they have their place. But, and chlorella, they're okay.
Charcoal. Yep.
Right. Right. There's a new class of binders that are much more effective in this day and age. Bioactive carbons from Cellcore can be much more targeted, and they can also not just mop things up in the gut, but also do deeper work, beyond that in the tissues because it's short, medium, and long chain carbons. But I also really like Toxin Binder, which is a liquid from Global Healing Center.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
excellent. And their foreign protein cleanse is excellent. And ozonated charcoal from them, it just has more surface area. So, and
Mm.
if you're extremely sensitive and you're like, I can't tolerate binders at all, I got you. That's our entire practice. You can start with something like Takasumi, which is a very gentle style of charcoal, that's very well tolerated. So at least you're mopping up something.
Yeah. So you're helping grab, sequester these toxins, and then as your detox systems, you're basically pooping them out, peeing them out, getting them out of the system. And so that's kind of how the binder is going to work. So you got to liberate the toxins. Obviously, most of our toxins we're storing in our fat cells. So we want to start to liberate those toxins, but then we need to actually get them into our detoxification systems or our drainage pathways, and then grab them and escort them out of the body.
Yeah, exactly. And every binder has a different job. So, people get into their comfort zones. I just encourage you to do your research and make sure that you're really
Yeah.
using the best binder for your chapter of healing right now.
For sure. And what are some of the best parasite killing herbs that you've used? And obviously, I'm sure you're using blends, but what are some of the ones that you found to be most effective?
So there's a couple different approaches you can take. I like to do a mechanical pulling out and start with the largest worms first.
Hmm.
So something like Mimosa pudica seed, Cellcore does one that's called Para One. That's great for pulling out biofilms and mucoid plaque and larger worms, and that really helps to free up your immune system to tackle the rest of it. So it has a nice synergy with other antiparasitics. And parasites can't evolve against and pleomorph against something mechanical and sticky like that. Whereas they can adapt over time if you're on an antiparasitic for too long, certain species are really good at adapting against an herbal formula, you know?
Hmm.
So that's a good one. I like their series of Para 2, Para 3, Para 4. Those are great. Para 3 is excellent for going systemic and dealing with flukes
Hmm.
and strongyloides and all that. I really like single herbs for very sensitive people. And I would actually, you can do it from largest to smallest in parasites or smallest to largest when you're working with single herbs. Sometimes working with something like Malia, which is a neem, but it's a very specific form of neem and very clean, is just a great thing to ease in one cap, and then you're working up to two caps twice a day, and then three caps twice a day, three caps three times a day. So you're just like, when I did that, I started like sweating and just like pouring
Hmm.
out junk, because I was just overloaded with fungus.
Hmm.
Um, I know it's so gross, but like nothing is TMI when you've been through chronic
Yeah,
illness,
yeah, of
right?
course.
And then you can go the opposite direction. Vedanga is an amazing herb for tackling larger worms. And Malia is a good like in-betweener. So you can actually pair all three at the same time, or you can rotate between the three. With parasites, I don't know what you think, David, but I find that like a little bit of consistency is crucial. Like you need to really work the same protocol, but you're dosing up, titrating, so that you can get to a significant shift. And then the body really appreciates it. The immune system almost wants to like take a different angle at it and rotate into different antiparasitics after a period
Mm.
of time.
Mm.
What do you find?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a couple things. I think that, typically having kind of a standard protocol that you start people with, but then you've got to kind of see what sort of signs that person gives, right? So having for most people, just a couple different blends, right? But then seeing and starting, we always start low and slow, right? That's always key. Make sure the
Yeah.
person's tolerating it well, and then kind of gradually boosting it up and seeing how the body's responding, how the individual's responding, which I know obviously that's what you're working with as well.
Mm.
And seeing what kind of signs and symptoms they're having and how they're responding to it. What are some of the things that you look for to help you know maybe if you need to increase dosage or if you have the right dosage?
Ooh, that's such a good question because, to your points, like there can be a lot of sensitivities along the way, right?
Yeah.
Um, well, we have three different strategies like that we lay out, for example, in our course Rapid Parasite Release, and I'll just tell you what they are right now. One is if nothing's happening on your para one and your other antiparasitic you paired it with, and you don't have reactions, and you're like, why aren't I moving the needle? Why haven't I seen anything in the toilet? And you're trying to make something happen. You can do something called we call it the gut scrubber challenge, where you take a cap or two caps of para one every hour on the hour for like
Mm.
8 to 10 hours that day. Just line in the digestive tract, like let's get a systemic response to the pathogen population issue. Like that, along with like enough bowel support to keep things moving, and
Yeah,
a
because
coffee
that
mimic.
para one is gelatinous, so it can slow you down. So kind of
Yes.
taking it, getting some magnesium or something like that in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. And also enemas are great for that. Coffee
Yeah,
enemas,
yeah. Right.
really help to the body to excrete difficult parasites.
Mm.
But that will make something happen. If you need to make something happen. Um, and a lot of people like some listeners are going to be like, how would I even know that? Because you have stubborn skin symptoms, fatigue issues,
Mm.
food sensitivities, and you're like, what is going to bust through this issue? Brain fog, anxiety, teeth grinding at night. You're like, you reach a point where whatever your parasite symptoms are, that's not just gut related, right? Like it can affect your whole body. My biggest issue was joint problems. I had no idea
Mm.
that that was parasite driven, you know?
Yeah.
Um, early diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. It's like, nope, just
Mm.
parasites. So if you're trying to make something happen, that's a great way to do it. If on the flip side of things, you're so sensitive that you can't get in enough
Right.
antiparasitics, then we have a couple of other strategies we lay out in the course, and I can just quickly like summarize them now for you. You will know which product you're reactive to. So you'll have your mitochondrial support and your binder and your drainage support, and all that has been folded in. And you're like, yeah, I can tolerate this. I'm fine. I'm ready for the antiparasitics. And then it's something like Para 2 or Vedanga. So whatever your thing of like, oh, if I take that, that's when I get the rash or the brain fog or the anxiety. It's not that you're allergic to that product. It's that the parasites are fighting back. So
Mm.
I encourage you to look at your reactions to these antiparasitics with a fresh lens because your parasites aren't stupid. They want to stay, they want to party. So, of course, they're going to fight back and they're going to express their displeasure because they can excrete endotoxins with various chemical compositions that will to influence your behavior. So, they're going to show you, I don't like this, whether it's fatigue or increased bloating or bowel changes, whatever. To your point, like Para-1 can definitely slow a lot of people down, that mimosa pudica seed. You can also have the opposite effect where you have like sudden violent diarrhea, and you're like, but it just hit
Mm.
my GI tract. How did that happen?
Hmm.
It's very interesting. So if you're one of those people that's reacting, you can do um, a pulse method that is sort of the opposite. You can micro pulse just that one supplement. Everything else is standard dosing every day, twice a day, but you're doing this one reactive supplement once a week with food, and then once every 5 days with food, once every 3 days with food, once every 2 days. And when you're down to every other day with food, you can increase the dose and get up to every day with food and then start taking it away from food. So it gives your body enough time to get the response, survive the response, and get through it. And most people can tolerate that. Even people with like serious, like heavy mold issues, like Stachybotrys, Fusarium, like all the really heavy, scary ones. And, parasites are overloaded because of it. We've had people be able to take one cap of Para One once a week with dinner, and the rest of the week, parasites are pouring out.
Wow,
You-
really?
Yeah.
One
Yeah.
cap, one time. Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
So everybody's different. And just because you're reacting to something doesn't mean you don't need it. It
Mm.
usually means you're right over the target. And the job between you and your practitioner, or you and the strategies you have available to you if you're DIYing this, is to figure out how to get this in and survive the process. You should not be in pain. Safety first. But there is a reality to parasite cleansing where you can reduce the reactivity and smooth out the way, but you're probably going to feel something from the neck down while you're working on this at some point.
Yeah, you should. You should notice something for sure. Well, this has been a great interview, and you've given us so many great tidbits here. And, there's so many people out there that are just getting kind of cookie cutter parasite cleanses and
Hmm.
haven't really put a lot of thought into it. And I think that's what you guys do so well over at Detox Rejuvenation. And so, guys, if you are looking for, a program that really walks you through how to do this properly, check out Sinclair's Detox Rejuvenation .com. Is it called the Rapid Gut Reset? Is that the name of the program?
Yeah, the one they could get that's really on
Yeah.
topic for this is rapid parasite release. And that's
Rapid
available year
parasite
round.
release. There you go.
Mhm.
Exactly. You've got a bunch of different programs, but
Yeah.
that is a really good one. Guys, check her out at detoxrejuvenation.com. And Sinclair, any last words, inspiration here for our audience?
You know what? I just want to remind you, you're so much stronger than you think. I
Hmm.
was a giant wuss. I crashed easy. I was scared to try all this stuff. I was super frustrated because I went to all these doctors that didn't understand me. If that's you, just know you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be brave. You just have to remember why you're doing this, why you're getting better. And you can absolutely make it through. If I can as a giant wuss, I know you can. Your body's really, really smart. And
Hmm.
it is never too late to feel really good in your body. So I just want you to know we're cheering you on. You're not alone if you feel like I'm sensitive. Like that's a lot of people in this day and age, and the answers are there. So keep going. You got this.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for your time and your expertise, Sinclair. Guys, again, check her out, detoxrejuvenation.com, and we'll see you all soon. Be blessed.